car didn't stop. It couldn't. It accelerated under the triple underpass, tires screeching as agents. You ever hear a sound that doesn't make sense, too sharp, too out of place, like a firecracker in a church? That's exactly what bystanders said when the first shot rang out in Dealey Plaza. November 22nd, 1963. A sunny afternoon in Dallas, Texas. The kind of day that makes everything seem just fun until suddenly, nothing is. Now, picture this. A sleek, navy blue, 1961, Lincoln Continental glides. The President of the United States is smiling, waving to the crowds, the wind gently tugging at his chestnut brown hair. People cheer, eyes wide with awe. Children sit on their father's shoulders, mothers grip the hands of their little ones. A few onlookers wipe away tears just seeing him, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. The youngest elected president in American history, a symbol of hope, charm, and unfulfilled promises. And then, just like that, hope takes a bullet to the head. But before the chaos, before Jackie Kennedy crawled across the back of that limousine in her pink Chanel suit stained with blood, there was a strange kind of calm, almost eerie, as if the city itself held its breath. And maybe it did, because JFK wasn't just a man. He was an image, a carefully curated symbol of post-war optimism. Handsome, Catholic, born into wealth, yet painted as a champion of the common man. He had enemies, plenty of them, but also admirers. And most importantly, he had secrets. So many secrets. At 12:29 p.m., Kennedy's motorcade had just turned off Main Street onto Houston. They were approaching the Texas School Book Depository, a drab, brick building no one paid much attention to. Except someone had studied its windows, its angles, someone had planned this moment down to the second. A few seconds before 12:30, Governor John Connally, seated in front of Kennedy, turned slightly and said, "You can't say Dallas doesn't love you, Mr. President." JFK, ever the charmer, replied with a soft smile, "No, you certainly can't." It was the last thing he would ever say. Then came the first shot. Most people didn't even realize it was a shot at first. You can hear it in the amateur future confusion, heads turning. But in that instant, the mood snapped. Birds lifted from trees. Secret Service agents leaned in. A second shot followed. Governor Connally screamed. Blood sprayed the inside of the limousine. But Kennedy was still upright, dazed. The final shot, the third one, was fatal. His head jerked back and to the left. A chunk of his skull flew onto the back of the car. Jacqueline shrieked and scrambled backward, not even knowing what she was doing. She was reaching, grabbing, maybe trying to collect the pieces of the man she loved. The car didn't stop. It couldn't. It accelerated under the triple underpass, tires screeching as agents and police officers scrambled. Civilians hit the ground, and a nation without yet knowing lost its innocence. But here's the thing. It's too clean, right? Too fast. Too precise. Within hours, the police had their man Lee Harvey Oswald, a former Marine, a defector to the Soviet Union, and nobody who worked at the book depository. They said he acted alone. A lone gunman. The perfect scapegoat. Except, he denied it. "I'm just a patsy," Oswald shouted to the press as they dragged him into custody. And 2 days later, before he could speak another word, he was shot live on national television by Jack Ruby, a nightclub owner with mob connections and a strange story of patriotism and grief. Case closed, they told us. But how do you explain the witnesses who said the shots came from the grassy knoll? The people who smelled gunpowder at street level? The strange gaps in the Secret Service protocol that agents pulled from the limousine at the last moment. Strange orders. A route through Dealey Plaza that was changed at the 11th hour. None of it adds up. None of it ever did. The Warren Commission gave us 888 pages and no real answers. And that's where the theories began to grow like weeds, wild, tangled, and impossible to ignore. You see, if you really want to understand what happened to JFK, you have to go back before the bullets, before the blood, back to who he really was. Not the myth, not the face on the $50 coin, but the man who made powerful people nervous. A president who promised to shatter the CIA into 1,000 pieces, who tried to pull out of Vietnam, who refused to support the Bay of Pigs invasion after it went south, who clashed with his generals, his intelligence community, even his own party. He wasn't playing by their rules, and that's dangerous. Ask yourself this: you were part of the machine, the real machine that runs things from the shadows. Wouldn't you want him gone? And what about his brother, Robert, the Attorney General? Ruthless, brilliant, and fiercely loyal. He once said, "If the American people knew what we have done to this country, they would string us up from the lampposts." He made enemies in the mafia, the CIA, and even the unions. And you think none of that had anything to do with November 22nd? This wasn't just an assassination. It was a turning point, one that would shift the course of American history forever. But in that exact moment, that fraction of a second when the bullet hit, something else died too. The illusion that we were in control, that the truth would always come out, that our leaders were untouchable. So now we're left with grainy footage, fading memories, and classified documents sealed for decades. We're told to accept the official story, to stop asking questions, to move on. But the echo of those 3 shots still lingers. In the silence between them, maybe you can still hear the truth. Or maybe the truth was buried in Dealey Plaza along with the president. Let's look at the man they told us pulled the trigger. Lee Harvey Oswald. Just 24 years old, with hollow cheeks, sharp eyes, and a life that reads like a spy novel, scribbled in the margins. He defected to the Soviet Union at the height of the Cold War, just walked into the US Embassy in Moscow, and said he didn't want to be American anymore. Stayed there, married a Russian woman, then came back to the United States with barely a raised eyebrow from US intelligence. Sound like something that happens to a regular guy? It gets weirder. After returning, Oswald bounced from city to city: New Orleans, Dallas, working odd jobs, always on the fringes of politics. He passed out pro-Castro leaflets one day, then was spotted trying to infiltrate anti-Castro groups the next. That's not ideology. That's infiltration. That's not a confused drifter. That's someone playing a role. But for whom? Let's peel back the layers. There's a photograph, infamous now, of Oswald in his backyard, holding a rifle in one hand and a Marxist newspaper in the other. It was used as key evidence to link him to the murder weapon. Except something's off. The shadows don't match. The proportions look wrong. Even Oswald himself said the photo was fake. "That's my face," he said. "But that's not my body." Was it doctored? Staged? And if so, by whom? And what about his connections to George de Morenchelt, a white Russian aristocrat, CIA asset, and close friend of Oswald? They met not long after Oswald returned from the USSR. De Morenchelt claimed it was all coincidence. But it never is it? Even more disturbing, in a letter found years later, de Morenchelt wrote, "I'm sure a psychiatrist would say Oswald is a schizophrenic, but if I didn't know he was capable of doing it, I wouldn't say anything. I still feel he was guided somehow." Guided. It's a chilling word. And then there's Jack Ruby, the man who killed Oswald before he could talk. Ruby claimed he did it out of grief. Patriotism, even. But if that's true, why was he seen in the company of known mobsters just days before? Why did he try, repeatedly, to be transferred to Washington, D.C., where he said he would reveal everything if taken out of Dallas. Why did he hint at a wider conspiracy before dying of cancer in jail? The mob, the CIA, anti-Castro Cubans, defense contractors. They all had reasons to want Kennedy gone. He wasn't just a threat to their business. He was a threat to the old order. Let's start with the mafia. JFK and his brother Robert had launched an all-out war on organized crime. Bobby, in particular, had been relentless. They'd gone after Jimmy Hoffa. They'd subpoenaed mob bosses left and right. They'd made enemies. And here, as the twist, some of the very same mobsters being targeted by Bobby had helped rig elections in Kennedy as favor just a few years earlier. They thought they owned him. Then he turned on them. Carlos Marcello, the New Orleans crime boss, was once quoted as saying, "The dog will keep biting you. Cut off the dog's head." The dog he meant was Bobby Kennedy. But the head, that was Jack. Then we moved to the CIA agency, seething over Kennedy's lack of loyalty. After the disaster of the Bay of Pigs, when Kennedy refused to send in air support, many in the CIA felt betrayed. "He left our men to die," they whispered. Kennedy blamed the CIA publicly and privately vowed to tear it apart. He fired key leadership. Allen Dulles, Charles Caballon, created a rift that never healed. And who do you think ended up on the Warren Commission to investigate Kennedy's death? Allen Dulles, the very man Kennedy had fired. Think about that. Meanwhile, anti-Castro Cubans, exiles, mercenaries, militant patriots felt JFK had sold out the cause. They had trained for months, even years, to take back Cuba from Castro, only to be hung out to dry on the beaches of the Bay of Pigs. Many believed Kennedy had betrayed freedom itself, and these were men with guns, with grudges, and with connections. Now put yourself in a room full of these players. The mob wants him dead. The CIA feels betrayed. The Cuban exiles want revenge. The military-industrial complex wants war, not peace. And Kennedy, he's pushing for secretly reaching out to Castro, signing a nuclear test ban treaty with the Soviets, planning to pull troops out of Vietnam. He's disrupting the entire post-war order. A threat to one man is manageable. A threat to everyone, that becomes a solution. And the puzzle pieces start to align. Witnesses silenced, documents redacted. The body rushed to Bethesda Naval Hospital under tight military guard. The autopsy botched, photos missing, X-rays vanishing, conflicting reports about entry and exit wounds. No civilian oversight. No transparency. Even the Zapruder film, perhaps the most crucial piece of footage in American history, was locked away for decades by time. When it finally resurfaced, experts noted strange timing gaps, odd frames, moments that looked tampered with. And what of the grassy knoll? Multiple witnesses reported seeing smoke, hearing shots, watching a man flee behind the picket fence. Some swore they saw a second shooter. Their testimony was often ignored, or were. You see, the problem with lone gunmen is that they're clean. They don't leave behind messy trails. They don't force us to ask deeper questions. They wrap things up with a bow, blame it on one man, bury the truth, and let the world move on. But something cracked that day in Dallas. It wasn't just a president's skull. It was the very fabric of trust. We were told a lie. Not necessarily about who pulled the trigger, but about why. The truth isn't in the bullet. It's in the silence that followed. The motorcade kept rolling after the shots rang out, but the world had already stopped. In the back of the limousine, Jackie Kennedy wasn't screaming. She was reaching, scrambling onto the trunk in a desperate attempt to collect the pieces of her husband's shattered skull. Secret Service agent Clint Hill leapt toward her, pushing her back into the car, shielding what was left of Camelot from more than just bullets. He was shielding her from history. Within hours, Lyndon B. Johnson took the oath of office aboard Air Force One, his hand on a Bible. Jackie by his side, still in the pink suit, soaked in her husband's blood. She refused to change. "Let them see what they've done," she said. That image, more than the bullet, more than the rifle, more than the suspect, became the real beginning of the aftermath. The loss wasn't just national. It was personal, collective, and suspicious. The official investigation started fast, but felt rushed. The Warren Commission, formed just 7 days after the assassination, was meant to close the book. Instead, it opened 100 more. 10 months later, their report said, "One gunman, 3 bullets. No conspiracy." The world was supposed to accept it and move on. But we didn't. Why? Because things didn't add up. Not in the autopsy. Not in the eyewitness reports. Not in the chain of evidence. We were told Oswald fired 3 shots in 6 seconds with a bolt-action rifle and managed to direct hits on a moving target from a 6th-floor window. Yet trained snipers couldn't replicate that feat under perfect conditions. And Oswald? He wasn't an expert marksman. He barely qualified at the lowest level during his Marine training. And what about the so-called magic bullet? One bullet that entered JFK's upper back, exited through his throat, then zigzagged through Governor Kennelly's body, breaking a rib, shattering a wrist, and lodging in his thigh, all without deforming significantly. It was found on a stretcher in almost pristine condition. Clean, neat, convenient. That bullet became a symbol of disbelief, of doubt, of how the government's story insulted our intelligence. Then came the witnesses who died mysteriously. Dorothy Kilgallen, the only journalist to interview Jack Ruby in private, was found dead in her apartment. She had hinted that she was about to break the story of the century. No notes were found. Her files vanished. Dozens of others' eyewitnesses, low-level informants, fringe players suffered sudden heart attacks, suicides, car crashes. Beyond coincidence. So, if we don't believe Oswald acted alone, or even at all, what was the real aftermath? It wasn't just a president's murder, it was the killing of belief. Before JFK, Americans trusted their government. After JFK, we questioned everything. Vietnam, Watergate, Iran-Contra, 9/11s. But that's where our innocence ended. JFK's death fractured the American psyche. We lost more than a leader. We lost a direction. The hope Kennedy inspired a country aiming for the moon, dreaming of peace, daring to be better, was replaced by suspicion, cynicism, and quiet resignation. The war in Vietnam escalated. Johnson signed off on it. Kennedy had planned to draw down troops. Some historians believe that if he had lived, tens of thousands of American soldiers might not have died in Southeast Asia. Entire families might have stayed whole. A generation might have avoided the draft, the trauma, the disillusionment. The civil rights movement surged forward, but without JFK's political finesse, it faced even greater resistance. Robert Kennedy stepped up. For a time, it seemed like he might carry the torch. Then he too was assassinated. June 1968. A bullet again. Another lone gunman. Another convenient story. Another hope erased. Conspiracy theories flourish not because Americans are paranoid, but because we were paying attention. Every decade since has added a new layer to the mystery. Declassified documents hint at covert operations. Former spies whisper tales of double agents, rogue operatives, and silenced voices. Even members of the House Select Committee on Assassinations in the 1970s, Congress's own reinvestigation, concluded that there was probably a conspiracy, but they couldn't name it. Why? Because every thread leads to a web. The CIA, the mob, military contractors, anti-Castro Cubans, and yes, even people within our own government. If any of it is true, then the assassination wasn't just a murder, it was a coup, a message to future presidents. There are lines you do not cross. Imagine if Kennedy had lived. Imagine a second term filled with diplomacy over domination. Imagine the Cold War thawing earlier. Imagine a Vietnam without war. Imagine NASA landing, not just on the moon, but inspiring a generation to look up, not over their shoulders. Imagine trust. But that's the thing about history, it doesn't care about what myths have been. It only records what was, or what we're told was. Still, some truths can't be buried in classified documents or redacted reports. They live in the silence of that moment. In the shadows on Dealey Plaza, in the disbelief in Jackie's eyes, in the refusal of ordinary people to stop asking questions. Who really killed JFK? We may never get a name, or a single face. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the power isn't in solving it. Maybe it's in refusing to accept the lie. Because the moment we stop asking, that's when history repeats itself. You were never supposed to question it. From the very beginning, the story of JFK's assassination was packaged, polished, and pushed onto the public like a finished product. One gunman, one motive, one clean ending. The media America's so-called Fourth Estate became the delivery system. Anchormen didn't challenge the official story. They read it. Newspapers didn't investigate inconsistencies. They endorsed the Warren Commission's version like gospel. It's strange, isn't it? A moment that shattered the nation was handed back to us like a bedtime story. Clean, simple, digestible. But real history isn't simple. And murder, especially, of a precedent he's never cleaned. Why did the media play along? Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was loyalty. Maybe it was something darker. Complicity. In 1967, the CIA issued a secret memo document, number 1035 to 960. Its purpose: discredit anyone questioning the Warren Commission's findings. Label them conspiracy theorists. Yes, that term, the one we now use as a punchline, was weaponized by the state to silence dissent. Think about that. The very act of questioning power became synonymous with lunacy. A brilliant move, if your goal is to kill truth without firing a bullet. And it worked. Walter Cronkite called Oswald the presumed assassin with the same tone he'd later used to announce the moon landing. TV specials ran reenactments of the shooting, carefully edited to match the government's narrative. Witnesses who deviated from the official timeline were ignored. Stories that conflicted were buried. For decades, mainstream outlets treated alternative theories not as leads to investigate, but as dangerous detours to avoid. But here's the irony. The public never fully bought it. We felt the gaps. The silences. The contradictions. A Gallup poll in 1966, just 3 years after the assassination, showed that 50% of Americans believed there was a conspiracy. By the 1970s, that number climbed above 80%. The truth had found cracks in the story's surface. It leaked out not through headlines, but through late-night whispers, bootleg documentaries, and college lectures. Through Oliver Stone films and dusty books passed hand to hand, the government tried to plug those leaks. The media tried to shame those who questioned, but the damage was done. The Kennedy assassination became a gateway. The moment America realized the people who deliver the news might not be delivering the truth, and we've seen it again and again. Weapons of mass destruction, the Gulf of Tonkin, surveillance, scandals, whistleblowers hunted down, not protected. Every time someone in power needed to sell a story, the media played middleman. Not always willingly, but rarely with resistance. The manipulation isn't always overt. It's in what gets aired. What questions don't get asked? Who gets interviewed? Who gets cut off? It's in the language. Lone wolf versus terrace. Accident versus negligence. It's in the editing room, where context dies and headlines are born. And it's faster now. More subtle. More relentless. Back then, they used newspapers and black and white TVs. Today, it's your feed. Your phone? The algorithm doesn't care what's true, it cares what spreads. Sensationalism wins. Nuance dies. And those who benefit from the chaos, they're just counting clicks. So when you hear someone say JFK conspiracy theories are outdated, ask yourself, why is it so dangerous to re-examine a moment that changed the course of history? Because if the truth about that day in Dallas ever came out, if we ever saw clearly who benefited from Kennedy's death, who orchestrated it, who covered it, we wouldn't just rewrite history. We'd start questioning everything. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the cover-up wasn't just about a murder. Maybe it was about control. Control of the narrative. Control of what we believe is possible. If they can make you believe that a bullet defied physics, that a drifter changed the world alone, that a magic bullet shattered Camelot, what else will you swallow? This isn't just about JFK. It's about power. And who gets to tell the story of power? It's about reminding you that history is written by survivors but often edited by manipulators. So how do you fight back? Start with doubt. Not blind skepticism, but courageous curiosity. Ask questions, even when the answers are uncomfortable. Follow the threads that lead to dark places. Compare sources. Watch who gets silenced and who gets spotlighted. And never forget, sometimes what they call a conspiracy theory today is just tomorrow's uncomfortable truth. The JFK assassination wasn't just a moment. It was a mirror. And we've been staring into it ever since, trying to see past the fog, trying to recognize the faces behind the curtain. And maybe, just maybe, refusing to look away is the most powerful act of all. Because the moment we stop questioning the past, we surrender the future.